Chapter 30. Flight of the Wereravens. Gostomir put his hands to his own throat and swayed back and forth. Then he made an angry face and ran around in a circle, beating his chest. "I'm sorry, I can't take any more of this," Rowan said, trying to keep from laughing. But when Gostomir started leaping in the air like a gazelle, a laugh slipped out. Rowan, Henry, Irina, and Casimir stood in the middle of the stone circle at Yester Hill, watching the Fae's performance with open mouths. Right after Gostomir had appeared to them, he went into an elaborate act as a dancing mime. The Fae glided over to Rowan and pulled a long multicolored scarf from her mouth. When the entire scarf came out, Rowan coughed. She gawked as Gostomir twirled the thing in a figure eight. "What is this?" Irina asked, sounding a bit annoyed. "Herkomoid says the fairy is trying to tell us something," said Henry, hovering between confusion and amusement. "I mean, look at him!" Irina gestured as Gostomir rolled on the ground. "This is worse than that moving picture book he sent us," Rowan said. "Maybe he just doesn't like talking," Casimir guessed. Gostomir dropped the scarf and stood up. "Of course I like talking. The situation is desperate, you know. What's wrong with you people? Haven't you heard that actions speak louder than words? Didn't any of you understand my dance?" Herkomoid flew around the Fae, nodding vigorously. The others only responded with raised eyebrows. Gostomir put a hand to his forehead. "Alas, I will have to tell you the boring way. Maybe I could sing it." Herkomoid shook his head. "No, you're right, little Herkomoid. Singing would go over their heads too." "Gostomir," Henry said, walking up to the Fae. "Is Navara all right?" "That's what I've been trying to tell you. She's alive. She's still Navara." "She hasn't been turned?" Henry asked. "No, she hasn't been turned." Henry let out a relieved sigh. "Thank the Morning Lord." "And now that all the Fanes are consecrated, Strahd can't control the weather anymore, right?" Rowan asked. "That's right!" Gostomir jumped. He looked up at the dark clouds. "Starting tomorrow, you can bet there won't be a cloud in the sky." "What if he comes back and desecrates them again?" Rowan asked. "No worries," Gostomir puffed out his chest. "Strahd can't enter consecrated ground, and if any of his non-vampire types try to do it, I'll fight them off." He strutted about, pretending to brandish a sword, as though he were a child play-acting. Rowan planted her face in her hands. "Is there a way we can get Navara out of Ravenloft?" Henry asked. "A way for us to get in and out of the dungeons." "Oh, she's not in the dungeons," Gostomir said. "Well, she was the first night, but now she's staying in the guest room you slept in after that dinner. Right now, she says she doesn't need rescuing. At least not yet. She wants you to find the last item from the prophecy. She thinks she can keep Strahd distracted while you do." "So that's why Strahd hasn't given us another visit," Rowan said. "Exactly." Snowflakes swirled around Gostomir as he spoke. "Navara's doing a fantastic job. A good job. Maybe too good. But anyway, she said today she's going to the Vistani camp by the Tser pool. And yesterday she met the Mad Mage." "The wizard on Mount Baratok?" Casimir asked. Gostomir lowered his head and squinted his eyes. "Good lord, are you an elf?" "I am," Casimir said slowly. Gostomir rushed over to him and lifted off Casimir's hood. "Hey!" Casimir stammered and backed off. "Where have your ears gone? They're just holes." "Gostomir," Rowan said, stepping protectively in front of Casimir. "That's very rude. Please, just tell us what has happened to Navara." "Right. Navara said she talked to the Mad Mage, but wants to wait to tell you more about him when she sees you all in person. She also said Strahd's owl is back. Its name is Sergei." "That's weird," Rowan said. What else? Gostamir put a finger on his chin. Oh, yes. She saw, and I quote, a gross, disgusting, bloody creature in a bathtub. I don't know why she thought that was important. She's been finding all sorts of strange things in the castle. Oh, and she's also found out about the Crystal Heart. It protects Strahd from any harm. No weapons or spells can destroy it. Of course, there must be a way, though. Well, Henry said, maybe we can find a way after we get the last thing we need. What is it again? He looked to Rowan. A symbol of hope? A treasure that lies in a dragon's house, in hands once clean but now corrupted, Irina recited. Who knows what kind of treasure it could be, but I think we decided to look for it at Argynvostholt. Ah, the dragon, Lord Argynvost, I knew him well, said Gostamir. You did? Henry asked. He was a good ruler, if a little vain. He had many statues and paintings commissioned of himself, but as I said, he was a good ruler. Even had an order of knights who pledged themselves to his service. Do you know anything about the treasure we're after? Rowan asked. All I know is that Navara wants you to find it, but after you do, she needs to escape Ravenloft. Oh, and one last thing. Navara has a necklace that allows Strahd to know exactly where she is and communicate with her, no matter where she goes. Only a spell that removes curses can unlock it from her neck. I can remove curses, Henry said. Really? Irina asked. Have you ever tried that on Strahd? Rowan smiled. I'd like to see that. Different kind of curse, Henry said, crossing his arms. If a damn angel couldn't break his curse, my prayers aren't going to help. Rowan! Gostamir exclaimed. You have the Spear of Kavan! After all these years, he's finally chosen someone. Congratulations! Kavan? Asked Henry. You mean the necromancer from Strahd's diary? That was Kazan, Irina said. Kavan the Great, chieftain of the hills, Gostamir said. He was a legendary warrior and a mighty druid. Rowan ran her hand along the spear's haft. It was a powerful weapon, and it felt so right to hold. But she feared what her connection to it might mean. Was Kavan in league with the dark powers? Oh, no. Gostamir waved his hand dismissively. He hated things like that. Alas, he had no children. He had all these lofty ideas about who was to succeed him, but no one measured up, and he died before he could choose. After his death there was a lot of squabbling among the mountain folk as to who would lead the tribe. It looks like he finally picked an heir. Just then a raven swooped from the sky and touched down on the hill, turning into a human. Gostamir spooked and disappeared. Who was that? Davian asked. Navara's patron, Henry said. You were successful, then, the old man stated. That's good news. I was beginning to worry. We should head back to the winery. Don't want to be out too late. It's the night of the full moon, after all. But I, should warn you. We Wereravens get rather rambunctious during the full moon. Nothing to fear on your part. You might think us a little undignified is all. We'll be happy for a bit of celebration, Irina said. So will I, Davian admitted. It's fitting, I think, that my last night at my home will be this night. I don't think I could bear leaving it otherwise. There was a popping sound, and Gostamir was back. Rowan, I forgot to mention, he sidestepped Davian. Your druidic powers will be stronger now that all 3 fanes are consecrated. Remember how you turned into giant animals in the bog fane? Now you can do that anywhere. Rowan noticed she did feel that same sense of energy. She raised Kavan's spear and transformed. White owl feathers sprouted from her arms, but this time she was no ordinary owl. She was the size of a large horse, and flapping her giant wings felt effortless as she rose into the sky over the hill. It worked. Her transformation remained even as she flew outside the fane. Rowan circled back and landed beside Casimir, who gave her an approving smile. Everyone set out for the Wizard of Wines, except Henry, who stayed behind to speak with Gostamir before he vanished again. "I just wanted to say," Henry said, "tell Navara that we'll go to Ravenloft whenever she needs us to." The burden of his own freedom at her expense weighed heavy on his shoulders. "I'll tell her," Gostamir said. The flurry of snow circling around him slowed. "I'll be honest. I've been terribly worried about Navara. She's in grave danger, and there's very little I can do to help her. But seeing all of you here has reminded me that danger is a small thing compared to friendship. Friendship is the source of every good and happy thing, and life would become quite tedious without it. Navara should not be counted unfortunate so long as she has friends like you." Henry tried to say something, anything, but the lump in his throat prevented him. "Hold on," Gostamir said, peering at Henry's nose. "Hold still, Alan. You've got something up there." Gostamir grabbed Henry's jaw, reached into his nostril, and pulled out a large pink lily. Henry shot his hands to his nose and rubbed it, thoroughly unsettled. "There, that's much better," Gostamir said, examining the flower. "I'll be going now." After Henry composed himself, he pointed at the lily and said in a low voice, "Gostamir, is there a way I could have a bouquet of those?" They locked the doors of the winery as night fell, and when the full moon rose, so did the distant sounds of howling werewolves. Henry, Irina, and Rowan exchanged worried looks, but after the Martikovs, Temescues, and Vinshaws transformed into their hybrid forms, the Wereravens' revelry renewed the others' spirits. The Keepers of the Feather struck up songs with lutes, flutes, and stomping feet. The winery became a tizzy of laughing and squawking, and Henry found himself caught up in it all. "It's been a while since we danced," Irina said, as he attempted to twirl her around. They danced by the staircase in the large fermentation hall. For each of Henry's clumsy moves, Irina made up the difference by gracefully gliding in the right direction. "I'm sorry," Henry said. "I'm a terrible dance partner." "At least you're trying. That's more than I can say for Rowan over there." The druid sat with folded arms, but her foot was tapping to the rhythm of the music. Hercomoid flew over to her and nudged her shoulder with his snout. "All right," Rowan smirked. She transformed into a Tressim, a small cat-like animal with feathery wings. Then she danced into the air with the pseudo-dragon darting after her, bobbing his head. "I have something special for you," Henry said to Irina. He stepped away from the dance floor and went to his cloak that was hanging by the front door. Out from the folds of fabric he pulled a bouquet of pink lilies. "For you," he said, and handed them to Irina. "These are beautiful," she said, touching the petals. "Where on earth did you find them? And at this time of year? I've never seen such bright colors on flowers before." "I have my ways," he said. The song ended, and Davian and Elvir set aside their instruments to down some more wine. Already tipsy, they spilled quite a bit with their clumsy bird beaks. "I found them," Stefania said, coming up from the cellar carrying a basket of mushrooms. Henry could only recognize her by her voice. All the feathery wereravens looked the same to him. Stefania began handing out the fungi to everyone. "We were saving these for mushroom mass, but seeing how it's our last night—" Henry and Irina each took a mushroom as the basket was passed around. "I didn't know Barovians celebrated mushroom mass," Henry said. "We're not that sheltered," Irina told him. "These are the real deal," said Casimir, coming up to them. Casimir had been dancing with the children, 3 little wereravens, who were now squawking at their mother for mushrooms. "I've only had the real kind a few times," Casimir said. "Each time was different. You never know what will happen. What do you mean? Irina asked. Casimir took a large bite of his mushroom, and suddenly there was a glass of wine in Henry's hand, and there was a glass in Irina's hand. In fact, everyone in the room had a glass, just when a moment ago they did not. I offer a toast, Casimir said, lifting his glass high. Everyone else lifted theirs with surprised expressions. To the keepers of the feather, may they all live to see another full moon. To the keepers, everyone said, and drank. Henry sipped his wine, then raised an eyebrow at Casimir. What? Casimir said. The last time I had one of those mushrooms I sprouted a horse's tail. This time, well, time completely stopped for a while. You should have seen your faces frozen in place. Ah, Rowan! Rowan had come down and transformed into an elf. I would have given you a glass too, but you are still in midair. What kind of mushrooms are these? Henry held it up. Magical ones. Stefania winked a beady little eye and handed a mushroom to Rowan. Irina popped one in her mouth. In an instant, the red-haired beauty transformed into a squat, balding goblin. She licked her thin lips and belched.
That tasted swell,
she said in a nasally voice. Rowan dropped her mushroom. Wow, Irina, Henry said. You look fantastic.
Oh boy, give me the mirror, Henry.
When Irina looked at her reflection in the small shard, her mouth curled into a monstrous grin of pointy teeth.
I do, she cried. I'm fantastic.
Irina batted her wrinkly eyelids and asked Henry for the next dance. The 3 children danced around them and ate their mushrooms on the count of 3. One of them turned purple. The other grew a unicorn horn. But the third was giddy to discover that she could read her siblings' thoughts, and chased them around, asking silly questions. Muriel Vinshaw grew to the size of a giant, her bird head level with the balcony at the top of the stairs. When Henry ate his mushroom, all it did was make him cluck like a chicken. The Wereravens squawked at this, trying to get Henry to speak Raven. They laughed at his every cluck and bok-ok. Thankfully, the effect wore off rather quickly, and he set off to coax Rowan into eating one. The druid eventually caved and ate. Pouring from her ears came puffs of blue smoke that smelled strangely like bacon. When Irina turned back into her human self, she grabbed Henry's hand and led him to the loading dock, where they could be alone. There they melded into one another, and kissed long into the night, forgetting their troubles for a time. You know, Henry said between kisses, you were pretty cute as a goblin. Would you like me to eat another mushroom? Irina feigned leaving, but Henry pulled her back. Her lips were soft, and feeling her body in his arms was all he wanted. Just then, a nearby howl interrupted the moment. Henry and Irina looked out a window. They could not see any creatures in the mist, but the sound, along with the sight of dead vines and heaps of decaying blights in the vineyard, reminded them that all was not well. We should get some sleep, Irina said. After she had gone to her room and fallen asleep, Henry snuck into her pack and took out Irina's needle and thread. He grabbed her cloak on the wall and went to the empty dining room. He pulled out a chair and sat by the window there, where the bright moon shone with a soft light. He threaded a needle, glad that his mother had taught him to sew, and began the delicate task. Moving the thread in and out was calming work, and as he thought of Irina, he almost felt at peace. Almost. Very early in the morning, Casimir stood on the roof, watching. The sky brightened, and the grim sound of werewolves died away. He waited and waited, until finally, dawn. The sun rose in the east, unclouded by mist for the first time in 400 years. He stared at the bright orb until his eyes watered. Casimir fell to his knees and held out his arms to greet the sun like an old friend. Sounds of tearful laughter rose from below, and Casimir came down from the roof to join them. Though everyone had stayed up late, no one slept in. They were all outside, standing at the edge of the vineyard, looking to the horizon. The keepers, who had all turned back into their human forms, were shielding their eyes and grinning from ear to ear. "So that's the sun," Irina said, unable to look at it. "I never thought I'd be so happy to see something I always took for granted," Rowan said, coming alongside Casimir. "I've waited over 4 centuries." Casimir forced himself to close his eyes for fear of being blinded. The warmth of the rays did not seem real. His skin prickled at the sensation. They all basked in their victory for a moment. But, like all good things in Barovia, it would not last if they did not press on. The keepers said their goodbyes and turned into ravens. The Martikovs and Temescus flew for the Necromancer's tower, while the Vinshaws flew to Vallaki. Elvir, however, flew to Castle Ravenloft to check on Navarra. Casimir, Henry, Rowan, and Irina would not be able to talk to Gostomir again until they met at one of the fanes. That would have to be after their visit to Argynvostholt. Casimir's new companions had high hopes that their warlock friend would come back to them unturned. But he knew better than to hope for that. It was dangerous enough hoping that Strahd could be defeated. Regardless, Casimir would not risk casting a sending spell to the vampire's captive. "Too bad we can't all fly to Argynvostholt," Rowan said when they were packing up. "I wish I knew how to turn into animals like you," Casimir said, stowing a loaf of barley bread in each of their packs. "I could teach you," Rowan said. Casimir's face lit up. Finally, he could learn more magic. "Would you?" he asked, fearing it was too good to be true. "Of course," Rowan gave a shy smile. "Say," she whispered to him as they grabbed their packs and followed Irina and Henry outside. "Irina has wings." Casimir looked at Irina's back. There on her cloak, beneath the collar, was sewn a pair of white wings. "Does that mean something?" Casimir whispered back. Rowan tried to keep a straight face, but her smirk came through. "All I can say is, it's really going to piss off Strahd."